They thought they were just picking up another suspect, a man who matched a vague description. But when he walked into court the next day, not in cuffs but in a tailored suit, the truth hit harder than any courtroom gavel. They had made the biggest mistake of their careers. It was just after 9 a.m. when dispatch relayed the call. A possible suspect, mid-30s, navy jacket, connected to a car break-in near Madison Avenue. Officers Brent Halcraftoff and Lynn Mercer were already cruising through downtown Boise, coffee in hand, barely tuned in. "There he is," Brent muttered, gesturing with his chin toward a man standing outside the Grange Bakehouse, one of the busiest cafes in the city. The man stood calmly, scrolling through his phone with a croissant bag in hand. He resembled the description, barely, but that was enough. Brent pulled the car over fast. No lights, no sirens. Lynn was already stepping out before the tires stopped rolling. "Hands where I can see them," she barked. The man, Kenton Miro, looked up, startled but composed. "Excuse me?" "You fit the description of a suspect," Brent added, stepping closer, hand hovering near his holster. "Don't move." "I'm standing outside a bakery," Kenton replied, puzzled. "Waiting for my driver." Lynn rolled her eyes. "We'll sort it out at the station." Kenton barely had time to respond before Brent grabbed his arm and spun him around. "You resisting now?" Brent said loudly, as nearby pedestrians began watching. Phones were coming out. Eyes were locked on them. Kenton didn't resist. He didn't argue. He looked down as the cold metal of the cuffs closed around his wrists. "Funny how they get quiet once the cuffs go on," Lynn smirked. "Probably another guy with a fake LinkedIn and a sob story," Brent laughed. They didn't ask for ID, didn't check his phone, didn't notice the receipt in his shopping bag. They just threw him in the back of the patrol car and drove off, already joking about the paperwork they'd have to fill out. In the back seat, Kenton stared straight ahead, his silence unsettling. "You got anything to say?" Brent asked. Kenton's voice was calm. "I want my phone call." Brent scoffed. "You'll get it after booking." But something about Kenton's voice, so composed, so unbothered, cracked their certainty just a little, enough to make Brent glance back again through the mirror. Kenton didn't look scared. He looked steady. At the precinct, the booking officer, Rob Tesh, did a double take. "You guys sure about this one?" he asked. Brent waved him off. "Match the call. Loitering near a break-in scene." "I was standing outside a bakery," Kenton said quietly. "You questioning a field call, Tesh?" Lynn cut in. Rob hesitated, frowned, but entered the information. When Kenton's data appeared on the screen, Rob blinked and stared. "I'd like my phone call now," Kenton said again, calm and polite. Brent raised a brow. "Who you calling? Your lawyer?" "No," Kenton replied. "The Attorney General's office." Brent laughed like it was a joke. "Sure. Tell him we said hi." They walked off, but Rob Tesh wasn't laughing. He was still staring at the screen, his expression shifting. In the holding cell, Kenton sat on the bench, not slouched, not stiff, just steady. His clothes were sharp, his posture confident. Everything about him said control. Down the hall, Brent leaned against a vending machine, sipping soda like it was just another Tuesday. "You see the look on his face?" he said to Lynn. "Yeah, they all think they're untouchable. Same script every time," she replied. Neither noticed the man from Internal Affairs walking past the front desk, or Rob Tesh, now speaking quietly into a secure line. When Kenton was finally allowed his call, he didn't scroll or hesitate. He just dialed. "This is Morrow," he said. "Boise PD, Madison Avenue incident. I'll need everything by this afternoon." Then he hung up. No drama, no raised voice, just business. Less than 2 hours later, a direct email from the Department of Civil Oversight landed on the precinct chief's desk. It wasn't a request, it was a directive. Immediate release of Kenton L. Morrow, attached, verified federal credentials, oversight clearance, and notification of an Article 14 audit under the State Law Enforcement Integrity Act. It hadn't come from a lawyer. It came from the Attorney General's liaison. 45 minutes later, Kenton was walking out, not in cuffs, not alone, but flanked by 2 state officials in suits. Brent saw him in the hallway, blinked. "That's not possible." "What the hell is going on?" Lynn muttered. Rob Tesh didn't say a word, just typed something into a system Brent and Lynn didn't even know existed. Kenton didn't look back. He didn't smirk. He just walked away with the same quiet authority he arrived with. And the silence he left behind was louder than any siren. That night, Brent ranted to his brother about favoritism in politics. Lynn, sipping a beer on her porch, told her girlfriend it had to be a mix-up. No one walks around that smooth unless they're hiding something. But whispers had already begun inside the department. Rumors, shifts in behavior. Even Captain Rolad seemed cautious, tense. And when Kenton's name came up, something in Brent's gut tightened. "We followed protocol," Lynn insisted. Brent nodded, but his face said otherwise. Because Kenton didn't act like the guilty. He didn't flinch. He didn't fight. He moved like someone who had already won. It should have been routine. Court appearances came with the job. Brent Halcroft and Lynn Mercer had testified dozens of times. File the report, make the statement, move on. The charge was minor. Obstruction in a stolen vehicle investigation. They figured Kenton would show up late, maybe flanked by a lawyer trying to spin the optics. But he wasn't outside. He wasn't in holding. He wasn't even listed as a defendant. As they passed through security, a bailiff intercepted them. "You two are here for 2C? "Yeah," Brent said. "Halcroft and Mercer." "Morrow case." The bailiff gave a flat blink. "Marrow's not the defendant." Brent's brow furrowed. "Come again?" "You'll see," was all the bailiff offered, pointing them toward the door. The moment they stepped into courtroom 2C, something felt wrong. Not chaotic, not loud, just off. The gallery was packed, but not with public defenders or nervous perps. There were reporters, cameras, someone from the city council. Brent's neck tensed. Then he saw the front table. There sat Kenton Moreau. No cuffs, no lawyer, just a man in a tailored charcoal suit flipping through a binder. A nameplate in front of him read, "Special Counsel for Civil Accountability, State of Idaho." Lynn leaned in. "What is this?" Brent's voice was barely a whisper. "This wasn't in any of the case notes." The judge banged her gavel. "This session concerns a procedural review into the conduct of officers Halcroft and Mercer regarding an arrest made on Madison Avenue," she announced. "Mr. Morrow will serve in an advisory capacity representing the state's Civil Accountability Office." Brent looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from under him. Lynn's jaw twitched. Neither spoke. Kenton hadn't even glanced at them. Not once. "Officers Halcroft and Mercer," the judge said, "please approach." They walked to the bench. Stiff, rigid, no longer in control. "Walk me through the reasoning behind Mr. Morrow's detainment," the judge asked. Brent cleared his throat. "We responded to a dispatch. Suspect in a vehicle break-in. Navy jacket, mid-30s. "Mr. Morrow has no criminal record," the judge interrupted. "Did you verify his identity before detaining him?" Lynn jumped in. "He matched the description, and he didn't comply immediately when we gave verbal commands." Kenton clicked his pen once. The sound echoed. He finally looked up. "In my work," he said calmly, "I've reviewed hundreds of reports that start just like this. Vague descriptions, assumptions made in the field. And over time, those patterns paint a picture. One the badge doesn't shield you from." Lynn opened her mouth to cut in. Kenton raised a finger, not to her, but to the judge. "I'd like to motion for a suspension of direct testimony," he said. "An internal review has already been authorized. A hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks." Silence fell. The judge nodded. "Granted." Brent and Lynn stepped back in stunned silence. Kenton closed his binder, stood without ceremony, and walked out. Calm, controlled, not triumphant, just deliberate. The press followed. Brent's hands shook. Lynn leaned close, whispering, "What the hell is happening?" But deep down, they both already knew. That wasn't a courtroom loss. It was a chessboard flip. Before Boise, before the courtroom. Before the tailored suit and advisory title, Kenton Morrow was just a smart kid in Bakersfield, California. His mother, Deidre, worked nights at Mercy Hospital. His father painted houses when he was around. Mostly he left behind cigarette smoke and silence. By 12, Kenton had already learned to live 2 lives. At school, he was a spelling bee champ, a science fair winner. At home, he kept his head down when patrol cars crept by. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, but he noticed everything. In 8th grade, a teacher accused him of stealing a calculator. They didn't question anyone else, just searched his locker. Found nothing. He said nothing, but he remembered. He remembered how easily suspicion sticks when it's pointed at someone who looks like him. It didn't make him angry, not in the way people expected. It made him focused. He earned a scholarship to UC Davis, studied political science, and wrote essays that didn't argue, they dissected. Law school came next, Stanford. No connections, no favors, just clarity and grit. While others chased corporate firms, Kenton interned at the Alameda County Public Accountability Unit. He didn't posture, he documented, listened to officers describe routine stops that ended in bruised ribs. He logged every word. By 33, he was leading case reviews for the Western District Office of Civil Conduct. Not a celebrity, not a talking head, just a name departments whispered when audit season came around. He moved like a lawyer, thought like an analyst, carried himself like a man who already knew what was buried in the reports. Boise was his first public appointment, special counsel for civil accountability, a role watchdog groups had fought for. He was handpicked, quietly confirmed, no press tour, no interviews. He didn't want revenge. He wanted patterns exposed. He wanted records cracked open. When Brent and Lynn cuffed him outside that bakery, they didn't just grab a man waiting for his driver. They grabbed the one person in the state who could legally audit their entire department. Back at the precinct, the air shifted. Not louder, not hostile, just tense. Brent noticed first, conversations dying when he walked into the break room. Not awkward silence, strategic silence. He opened the fridge, grabbed his lunch, acted like it was nothing. But it was something. Lynn felt it too. Hours later, she passed a conference room and saw Lieutenant Schaffer speaking in hushed tones with two men in dark suits. No badges. One held a leather folio. Federal by the look of it. The conversation stopped the moment she came into view. That night, Brent got a call from his cousin, also a cop over in Twin Falls. He sounded cautious. "You might want to lawyer up," he said. Word spreading, because it wasn't about one arrest anymore. It was about all of them. And the man they thought was just another civilian, he was already inside the system and holding a pen that could rewrite their futures. "Hey," Brent's cousin said on the phone, voice low. "You didn't cuff some guy named Morrow last week, did you?" Brent's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because his name's bouncing all over the place. State Audit Board, Oversight Committee. People over here are treating their case logs like they're about to be raided." Brent forced a laugh, but it didn't land. "Nah, just a misunderstanding. Guy got mouthy. We cleared it." He hung up, but the lie felt hollow, even to him. 2 days later, the captain summoned them. Not a casual check-in. Formal request, full uniform, a paper trail. When they stepped into his office, the two suits from the hallway were already seated across from the desk. "Officers Halcroft and Mercer," Captain Roldad began, clipped and unreadable. "This is Mr. Granger and Ms. Osai from the Office of Civil Accountability." Neither of the visitors smiled. Osai barely blinked. "We're opening an internal review," she said, "concerning an incident last Thursday involving Mr. Kenton Moreau." Brent's face stayed still. "We've already talked about that. He was released, case dismissed. End of story." Granger spoke up. "The investigation goes beyond that arrest." Lynn's back straightened. "Excuse me. We're reviewing your stop history, use of force records, complaint files, and reports that were later amended or adjusted." Captain Roldad slid a manila folder across the desk. "You'll receive subpoenas. Review hearings in 2 weeks." Brent opened his mouth, then shut it again. Lynn swallowed hard. "Are we being accused of something?" Granger didn't blink. "Not yet. That's what the hearing is for." The next morning, the email landed in their inboxes. Subject line, "Case Review Summary, prepared by Special Counsel K. Morrow." It was loaded with attachments, years of stops, timestamps, body cam discrepancies, and civilian statements. Some they barely remembered, some they wished they'd forgotten. Brent hovered over the files for nearly a full minute before opening one. A stop from 3 years back. A man named Julian York, broken taillight, detained for noncompliance. Charges dropped. No body cam footage uploaded. But in York's statement, he claimed he was slammed against the hood of his car for asking to speak with a supervisor. Brent remembered it. Not every detail, but enough. Lynn messaged him. Lynn, they're going to make this look like a pattern. Brent, it is a pattern. There was a pause before she answered. Lynn, we followed protocol. Even she didn't sound sure. Because Kenton wasn't coming with just a complaint. He was coming with receipts. And Brent and Lynn were starting to realize this wasn't a cleanup. It was an autopsy. The review wasn't held at the precinct or the courthouse. Instead, it took place in a neutral municipal building off Fairview Avenue. The kind of gray-walled place usually reserved for zoning disputes and forgotten council meetings. But that day, every seat in the room buzzed with tension. Brent adjusted his tie 3 times before stepping in. Lynn sat outside flipping through a folder, unread for the past 20 minutes. Inside, a dozen people circled the table. Legal observers, a member of the city's ethics board, 2 from the state attorney's office. No uniforms, no allies. At the head sat Kenton Morrow, calm, not angry, not smug, just ready. Ms. Osai opened the session. This is a formal review under Article 14. Officers Halcroft and Mercer are present. Allegations concern abuse of discretionary authority and repeated misapplication of procedural stops. She turned to Kenton. Special Counsel Morrow, you have the floor. Kenton didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean in. He simply opened his folder. This isn't about accusations, he said. It's about patterns. He slid the first document onto the table. Case 1, Julian York, broken taillight, detained 47 minutes, no charges, no body cam upload. Lynn cleared her throat. That was 3 years ago. Kenton didn't even glance up. Case 2, Alan Rivers, matched suspect description, same precinct, same phrasing in the report. Detained. No probable cause. No charges. Another document slid forward. Case 3. Different stop, same officers, same language. Fit the description. Suspicious behavior. Non-compliant tone. Brent leaned forward, voice tight. We respond to dispatch calls. We don't write the descriptions. But you do decide how long you detain someone. Kenton replied evenly. You decide whether to check IDs before making assumptions. You choose your tone, your language, and how often someone with no record leaves bruised and unheard. He unfurled a printed map marked with red pins. These are all your stops in the past 5 years. The pins weren't random. They clustered along certain streets, certain neighborhoods. We compared your data to 3 other patrol teams, Kenton said. You conduct 42% more stops. Over 80% involve individuals from one demographic. Over 90% lead to no charges. Miss Osai added, calm but cutting. That's not policing. That's profiling. Lynn's voice rose. So what? We're being put on trial for doing our jobs? For following procedure? You're not on trial, Kenton said, voice steady. You're in review. A review triggered because, for once, you stopped the wrong person, not someone without credibility, without recourse. Me. He paused, let the silence do the work. I wasn't anyone special that day. No badge, no suit, just a man outside a bakery. And that was enough for you. Brent exhaled sharply. We had a dispatch. We didn't target you. You didn't have to, Kenton replied, because you built a system where the targeting happens automatically. He let the room breathe again. You can't fix what you won't admit. No one spoke. The silence didn't feel triumphant. It felt surgical. By day 2, Brent Halcroft looked frayed, shoulders tense, eyes hollow. He barely spoke to Lynn. Lynn still wore the old defiance, but her eyes gave her away. Too alert, watching every corner. Kenton didn't bring fire. He brought people. One by one, they spoke. Julian York described how he asked for a supervisor and walked away with a sprained wrist. No charges, no follow-up, just silence. Alan Rivers described being misidentified, then thrown to the ground in front of his daughter. She didn't speak for days afterward. Brent shifted in his chair. More came forward. Not all, but enough. They didn't shout. They didn't rage. They told the truth plainly. That made it harder. Brent and Lynn couldn't poke holes in stories that simple. Lynn crossed her arms. We've seen the worst in people. We don't have the luxury to hesitate when things match up. Kenton studied her like someone examining fault lines in a wall. Maybe the problem is what you think a match looks like. Brent's voice cracked. You don't know what it's like. The pressure, the lies, the split-second calls. You change out there. Kenton nodded once. I don't deny the job is hard, but when the same kind of face keeps paying for other people's mistakes, it stops being about danger, it becomes about comfort. Comfort? Lynn scoffed. The comfort of assumptions, of never being the one on the ground. Then Osai opened another folder. 3 reports in the past 24 months show altered body cam submissions. 1 labeled corrupted, 1 never uploaded. Brent looked up slowly. That's a tech issue. That's not on us. Kenton didn't blink. It wasn't on you the first time, or maybe even the second. He closed the folder gently. But after that, it's a choice. But now they were on the 4th report, and for the first time, Lynn had nothing to say. The weight of it all, data, body cam gaps, stories, patterns, was finally pressing down in ways they'd never prepared for. They'd always been insulated, always backed by silence, by habit, by systems too tangled to untangle. But now Kenton wasn't swinging a hammer. He was just holding up a light. One of the panel members, a former officer herself, leaned forward. Do either of you acknowledge that your actions may have caused harm? Lynn's eyes flicked from the woman's face to the tabletop. Her voice came low, unsure. We did what we were taught. The words hung in the air like a weight no one wanted to claim. Kenton spoke, soft and steady. Then maybe it's time we start teaching something else. Because once you see the cracks, you can't pretend the wall still holds. The final day didn't open with spectacle. No gavel, no yelling. Just the quiet rustle of paper and the hum of people who understood. This story was ending, and not everyone would leave unchanged. Brent and Lynn sat in uniform, but the uniforms didn't hold the same power anymore. Brent's shoulders sagged slightly. Lynn's arms were folded across her chest, not in defiance, just restraint. Kenton rose. No lawyer, no camera crews. Just him and a worn folder, the edges softened by time and truth. He laid it gently on the table. I've said what I needed to say, he began. You've heard the stories. You've seen the data, the language repeated in report after report, the footage that vanished, the faces that didn't. He looked at Brent. I don't believe you joined this department to cause harm, but somewhere along the way, you stopped checking yourselves. You stopped seeing people. You started seeing patterns. Silence settled again, not cold, surgical. I'm not here to ruin anyone's life, Kenton said. That's not justice. But a system can't fix itself if it keeps protecting what's broken. He turned to the board. My recommendation, Officers Hal Craftoft and Mercer be removed from field duty indefinitely. They undergo new training, psychological review, and this department receives a full audit. I also ask that every case flagged during this review be reopened. Brent didn't react. He'd known this was coming. Lynn whispered, just loud enough to be heard. It was a job. Kenton met her eyes. Number it was a responsibility. And when you forget that, people get hurt. The board recessed into closed session. 35 minutes later, they returned. Brent Hal Craftoff, suspended. Badge revoked. Pending reassessment. Lynn Mercer, same. Neither objected, neither stood. No outburst, no denial. Just 2 officers who had spent years believing the system would always catch them. Now it didn't. Kenton packed up quietly. As he passed Brent, he paused. Brent glanced up, weary. I didn't think it would end like this. Kenton didn't flinch. It didn't have to, but that was never up to me. Then he walked out. That evening, Brent emptied his locker alone. Lynn never came back. Word was she'd filed for personal leave. No one reached out. The precinct moved on like it always did. The same hands that once clapped them on the back at holiday banquets were now too busy to text. A new poster appeared near the squad room. Civil Accountability Hotline. Confidential. A few rookies stared at it a little longer than they should have. Kenton boarded a flight to Dean the next morning. Another city, another precinct, another quiet reckoning. He didn't stay long. He never did. His job wasn't to become the story, it was to make sure the story got told, and that someone, somewhere paid attention. Because when no one watches the watchers, the cycle never breaks. Now someone was. 2 months later, Boise was different, just enough to notice. No marches, no viral headlines, but things shifted beneath the surface, and the ones who knew what to look for felt it. Kenton Miro didn't return. He never planned to. His purpose was motion, city to city, case to case. Not for applause, for consequence. Not for justice's image, but its spine. The Boise training manual changed, quietly but meaningfully. Recruits were now required to study real footage, not dramatized examples. One of those case studies? Kenton's. An orientation began with a new question. Have you ever made a mistake and learned from it? Not to shame, but to see if someone could hold accountability before they held a badge. Brent Halcraftoff found a desk job in the city impound lot. Quiet, unarmed, unseen. He didn't talk about the hearing. Some said he was bitter. Others said he'd started listening. Lynn Mercer never came back. Moved back to Wyoming, close to her sister. No interviews, no tweets. She didn't fight the outcome, but she never embraced it either. Some of the people they stopped got apologies. Not all, but some. Julian York got a letter from the mayor's office. Ellen Rivers got a call from the city attorney asking if he'd be open to mediation. No headlines, no fanfare, but signs. That was the part most people miss. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks out of a review hearing, holding a folder, and makes sure no one forgets the names inside. The point was never that Brent and Lynn were monsters. The point was how easy it is to stop seeing people as people, and how dangerous that becomes when you wear a badge. Maybe, just maybe, some rookie in that precinct, fresh badge, clean boots, will remember. When they get a vague description and a call on the radio, maybe they'll pause. Maybe they'll ask a question before they draw a line. And maybe that's enough to change one moment, one story, one life. Because change doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just refuses to look away.